Please remain seated. The show will begin in 3, 2...
Like a Hellcat. For more awesome content, like and subscribe now.
It was the spring of 1998, and I was 9 years old at the time. My name is Coco, and I'm now 35 years old, a professional athlete still competing in national championships. The events of this story happened around the time that my older brother Dennis and myself had lost our father under mysterious circumstances. It was a stormy evening with heavy rain and winds in the village where we were staying. And the first night I spent there is when Dennis and I had a very bizarre and overwhelmingly frightening experience. It was in the middle of the night at around 11, and my grandmother's house was a huge hut with a ground floor that had a kitchen and a small sitting area. There was no bathroom due to plumbing problems within the area, so there was a public toilet that was located some distance away outside of the village. The top floor was a massive space where a few people had slept together. My brother and me, with our younger twin cousins Alon and Nemuel, who were both 6 years of age. A mother slept in the guest house, which was located a couple yards away, and my grandmother, who was estranged within the family, kept to herself and usually left at odd hours and didn't return until late morning. Nobody understood why nor bothered to ask, because not a single person in our group liked to disturb her. Quite frankly, nobody made direct contact with her nor had spoken a word to her in 30 years, let alone our entire visit. It was presumed that my grandmother was growing ill and becoming grouchy in her old age, due to a debilitating disease that couldn't be explained. Social interactions were either limited or non-existent. I was tossing and turning a bit, struggling to get back to sleep, as I felt something was off, but I wasn't sure what to think of it. I then had the urge to use the toilet. I gulped nervously, looking out as I opened the wooden shutters, peering through the tinted glass of the only window in the room. I never liked going outside after dark, and I was strictly forbidden from leaving the house without an adult present, but I never knew the reason for this till I was much older. The rain had stopped, and I walked down the graveled path, strolling past the various homes that surrounded me. The wind was howling and carried eerie moans, causing the trees to bend and sway, as the sky was a gloomy gray and decorated in black clouds. I kept walking. 15 minutes passed, and suddenly I heard this sound. It was very loud. It was somewhere close by. Outside was engulfed in fog, and I was blindly navigating myself through it, trying to make my way to the large cement building with the restrooms. The noise went something like tick tick, tick tick, tick tick, tick tick, tick tick, tick tick. It stopped me in my tracks abruptly, and I listened as the sound grew into more high-pitched, bat-like shrieks. I was afraid and made a mad dash until I reached the public toilets and ran inside to one of the stalls. I locked the stall door and just sat, waiting patiently for the noise to pass. But I was sick to my stomach, trembling fearfully as soon as the noises traveled along the public restrooms. There was a scratching on the roof, and it went on for like 10 minutes or even longer, before it eventually ceased. I had finished my business and cleaned myself up before exiting the building. My eyes shifted left to right, and I looked towards the sky. I saw a silhouette of a figure with elongated arms and bat wings hovering within the fog, flapping and bouncing about as it flew. It then disappeared within the trees behind a hut, and I hurried back to my grandmother's house, getting back into bed and huddling underneath the bed covers. I didn't sleep the remainder of the night. The next morning at 10 o'clock, I got up and bathed down the back, using the garden shower before getting dressed, and heading into the kitchen to help my mother prepare breakfast. It was family tradition that we were the last ones to eat. because according to my mother, my grandmother liked cooking her own meals and liked eating alone. Everyone else had to eat when she was finished, and so once my grandmother had left to go to her room with the door locked, we also ate and had done the usual chores around the house before my brother Dennis and I went exploring. As we strolled through the woods, I confessed to him about what happened the night prior, and Dennis shuddered. He quickly changed the subject. I pressed him continuously because the way he was acting was dodgy and he appeared distracted. I asked him again what was wrong, but at this point he just got angry and scolded me about breaking curfew. I said nothing more and let it go, since I wasn't going to get an answer. A few days went by, and on a Sunday my mother went to the market in town to get groceries, and my brother, including my twin cousins, went with her. I was left alone with my grandmother, who was making a racket downstairs in her room, and I don't know what she was doing in there, but the noises were unsettling. I jumped startled when I heard a loud crash, and the excessive mumbling in her native language and incoherent speaking. There were also low growls and snorting, then chewing, gnawing sounds, and the rattling of a chain. I wasn't certain if she had a pet. She had to have eaten 5 or 6 times a day, and again during the middle of the night. I was so young and I didn't understand the gravity of the situation. I remember the rest of my family coming home and I tried to tell them what happened, but instead I was just told to ignore it and act like things were normal, to not upset my cousins. I went to school in the nearby city and focused on my studies. I could hear other children talking in the hallway, and they were mentioning how there were newborn infants going missing in their cribs, even numerous cases of women suffering from miscarriages. Whenever I would ask somebody about it, they would just pretend to be busy and make up an excuse as to why they didn't want to talk. My curiosity was piqued, and I was becoming frustrated because my family and everyone else was keeping some major secret from me. I decided to find out for myself what was going on, and being the naive, foolish kid I was, I did the most stupid thing ever. I snuck downstairs when everyone else was asleep, and I used a hairpin to pick the locks on my grandmother's door. I did it slowly and cautiously as I listened for sounds, for some sort of indication that my grandmother was awake. Strangely enough, it was quiet as the grave, and I entered, tiptoeing down concrete steps. The air was bone-chilling, and I was led down a long hallway that had several scratch marks on the walls, the smell of feces, muddy footprints stained on the ground, etc. I arched an eyebrow, examining the footprints more closely. The footprints were large and had only 3 toes. Each of them looked more like claws. The footprints looked like they were 8.5 to 9 feet wide. I followed them to a cell door. The cell door was busted open and bent out of shape. I should have left then, but I couldn't. I needed to see, I had to know. I peered into the room and saw rotting meat scattered everywhere. What I saw on the floor was the remains of a young woman who was one of the villagers that had been missing for months. I recognized her. Her name was Agawa. Her belly was torn open, and it finally hit me. Not just the stench, but the realization that this woman was pregnant and the fetus was gone. I vomited and collapsed in shock. I lost the feeling in my legs and I could barely stand. I struggled to get off of the floor. It took me another 5 minutes to find my strength and bolt back up the stairs. I ran to my cousins and my older brother on the 2nd floor, and they weren't there. I panicked and ran to the guest house where my mother slept. I banged on the door 3 times and she didn't answer. I kept running when I heard the tick-tick, 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 tick-tick. I stumbled and fell in the middle of the field, and I heard that tick-tick that was then far away. I was panting heavily and my heart was racing. Then suddenly I heard the flapping of wings above me, and the tick-tick followed by a banshee-like shriek. And that's when I looked up.